Good evening, good to have you with us on the second edition of the Urban Debate. Tonight, we now put the spotlight on the economic impact of this battle against coronavirus. Weeks of a lockdown has meant that the economic activity has had to come to a standstill. And every day that businesses are unable to run, every day that industries are unable to manufacture, every day that retailers are unable to sell, every day that airlines are unable to fly, they are losing money. What we do know is that economy this year and economic growth this year is going to be really slow, if not negative or flat. Even as per the IMF, we are looking at a growth of just about 1.9%. A country that just about 15 months ago was growing at a rate of 8% is looking at a possibility of growing at just 2% this year. Now, these are projections. Things can change. Things can change for the better. Things can change for the worse, which also makes this the nightmare for business owners, for entrepreneurs, for leaders and CEOs and CFOs and human resources leaders. Because this is a time that they need to look at various options to ensure that the business doesn't shut down. And while they do that, they also need to look out for their own people. Let's remind everybody that the Prime Minister, who spoke a few days ago, also made an appeal saying, please watch out and look out for those whom you have employed. Try not to fire people, not to lay them off. Take care of them, help them as much as you can. While yes, that must be the intent, how do we go about it? It's easier said than done. When the businesses are not making money, where will they find the money to pay their employees? So what are the options? That's what we need to look at right now. And tonight I want to speak about that. Tonight I have experts who are going to sit here and tell us how to deal with the human resource aspect of this pandemic. How to deal, what should the companies, smaller businesses, bigger businesses be doing to ensure that the impact and the damage is bare minimum. That's simply what I want to ask our panelists tonight. So let's say good evening to those who are joining us on this special conversation. I've got Rituparna Chakraborty, President for Indian Staffing Federation and co-founder for Teamlease; Rajneet Singh, Managing Partner for Simply HR Solutions; Prabir Jha, HR Strategist and Founder and CEO for Prabir Jha People Advisory. And let's begin with you, Prabir Jha. These are tough times. We are already seeing multiple reports come out about salary cuts, about people being sent on leave without pay, and people losing their jobs. How does one tackle this part of the pandemic?
Well, we definitely have a problem at hand, and a huge one at that. And, as I said, the cookie is going to crumble. That's for sure. How bad and when, we don't know yet. I think the challenge for industry, for companies, is to survive first with minimal pain, but there will be pain. So the challenge is, how do you have maximum business impact with minimal pain? And for me, I think a lot of thinking which is happening around pay freezes, no increments, no bonuses, maybe even restructuring of salaries across levels. I think these are going to be practical options for companies to look at when you look at the hard measures, because I do not see in any other way especially the MSME segment, surviving. There will be many cases of companies going belly up. And given all of those situations, it is about buying time, and by reducing your wage bill. And in some sectors, it is higher. In some sectors, it is not as significant. But given the volatility that is there, the depressed demand, the supply chain challenges, I think the idea is to make sure that you conserve more jobs, even at reduced pay, than to let people go off altogether.
Okay, Because obviously nobody really wants to let go of people, nobody wants to fire people, nobody wants to tell them that, well, you're not going to get paid this month or next month, or instead of giving you an appraisal, which is what ideally I would be doing at this point, Rituparna Chakraborty, people will be told perhaps that I am going to take away your salary, I'm going to give you a 50% cut. That's going to be a big challenge, even for the leaders, to implement this, to get the messaging across. How do we go about it?
First and foremost, I think corporate India has done its bit by paying a 21-day down payment from their side towards the fight for corona. In itself, it's a lot. And I think that now is extended. Now it has to go on till about 3rd of May. I don't think any business have calibrated the situation where they see suddenly overnight zero revenues kicking in. And we must remind ourselves that shareholders don't pay salaries, customers do. So at some point, when customers dry up and business dry up, there would be a sustenance issue. Of course, it would impact different organizations in different proportions based on their scale, based on the size of the business, based on the nature of business. But sooner or later, I think we will run short of commercial policies to bail us out of the situation. So I think I completely agree with Prabir when he says that it's not really a choice anymore for employers, but if employers themselves do not survive, there are no employees, possibly. And hence, while it is not an intent for employers to kind of do or resort to the worst possible scenarios, I think it's now a matter of existence, a matter of survival. And of course, some organizations going to be more resilient than others. The startups and the MSME segment stands completely exposed and vulnerable in the present times. We will see, and if we are not already witnessing, organizations crumbling for solutions around how to effectively tide through the current situation through conservation of cash, through within the ambit of law, given all the kind of advisories that are going around, to kind of figure out in between solutions to kind of type. It could include, we are already hearing talks about within the ambit of law, conversations are doing the rounds on furloughs, on LOPs, on wage adjustments. And that is going to be a reality. We really can't expect more than what's all the down payment that has already been paid by corporate India.
I know what you're all saying is actually, unfortunately, the truth and the reality and what we should be preparing ourselves for. But it's still extremely depressing to have this conversation, to know that we're going to have a tough ride even once the lockdown is lifted. And that's the truth. Now, I just want to also go through what some of the others from the industry have said, just to give us a sense of, what the various different companies are doing right now, but perhaps will be doing in a few weeks from now. For example, Shamal Mukherjee of PwC India chairman has been quoted as saying that we've initiated proactive measures to keep employees safe. We are deferring promotions, deferring increments and bonuses for employees, partners and executive directors will be taking a 25% pay cut. We've also got, the Future Group, one of the biggest in the consumer sector, in the retail sector, saying we're working on a strategy to nearly halve people expenses in the April to June quarter without resorting to layoffs. So options are being considered to include voluntary and temporary salary cuts at leadership level. We've got the Panasonic India CHRO saying variable payout, which is 20% of the compensation, is getting impacted. Fixed costs are being reviewed. Layoff is the last resort for us. Kaustubh Sonalkar, head of HR for the SR Group, has been quoted as saying, we'll look at strategic ways of reducing costs, and layoffs are not currently under considerations. And then there are those who are saying that non-manpower costs around travel, events, offsites curtail, as well as others which are not business critical. You've got Deloitte India partner, Mr. Ghosh, who's been quoted as saying most firms are focusing on looking at multiple alternatives for conserving cash. This can only help you tide through, Rajni Singh, for a few months. For an economy that was already in a turbulent mode, with now a a 5-week lockdown, we will have to go beyond the conventional cash saving measures and start looking at some kind of a step that will have impact on people. How do we make it easier for the people?
I think, thank you, Tanvi. Very interesting times we are living in, very unprecedented. So everybody is really caught underprepared, not only in India, but globally as well. And I think it's a huge, like what I have been talking about, it's a huge leadership moment because this is no fault of anyone in the organization. This is like a natural calamity that has happened. And for the leadership in these times, it is very, very important that they don't just take a knee-jerk decision of asking people to go. Uh, Starting March itself, when the whole lockdown was implemented, a lot of leadership moved very fast. And they said, at the leadership level, we will take a cut to start with, set an example. I think that is what has happened brilliantly in some of the Indian organizations. And then come April, when probably the storm is likely to peak, we still have another 10, 12 days to go in April. Uh, these are the days when again the leadership will be tested. Am I again going to take a knee-jerk decision and start asking people to go? I think it's still a moment where you can still take a cut on salaries for the rest of the team. But what I can share with all of you is that many organizations, in good faith, till a certain CTC and below, they're just not doing any cut. And whether it was the advisory from the government or whether it is the call of the leadership, I think that's a very, very bold step. That's a very, very interesting step that the leadership has taken. I think it's very important that it's very easy to let go. I mean, there are contract terms where you can just state that in a letter and tell the person you can't come from tomorrow. And I think sadly, a lot of that happened in smaller companies when the lockdown got announced, and that's why we had this whole exodus of migrant labor who suddenly the next morning were on the streets. Probably the smaller, and the other thing that I can definitely share is come 20th, and there is that little glimmer of hope that the government is in a partial mode, really starting off some sectors. That's very good news. I think if that happens, companies need to really restart in a very phased manner, probably get people back. I think those gestures are going to really make a lot of difference for people down the years when people are going to remember the leadership, how you really acted when a crisis came up.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm just going to give one example that while yes, there may be some companies who are stepping up, who are watching out and looking out for their people and finding different ways. There are also already reports coming in that while you keep those who are on your payrolls, you keep them on. You are also getting rid of the extra staff that's part of your business, but not really on your payrolls. The largely, which can be in a way said maybe the unorganized sector. So if there is an FMCG guy or a retailer and they have sales staff and distribution staff that now they're not paying anymore, they're cutting down on those numbers. So already aren't we seeing a large part of our population being rendered jobless?
Is that for me, Tanvi?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So Tanvi, very much, if you really see, and like you correctly mentioned just a while back also, that the economy was anyway was badly hit, and we had the automobile sector, one of the larger employers, really already in a many months probably in a shutdown mode. So this came as a double whammy for the automobile sector, where the larger population, which is like you mentioned on a contractual employment, they have got affected very, very badly. So no discussion about that some of the people definitely have got impacted much bad, in a very bad way. But I also hear good stories again of employers, Indian employers, who are also really thinking about the contractual labor also, that if we can't pay them X money, can we still do some a bare minimum wage to really keep them still surviving? I think today the discussion is all around survival, whether it is business, whether it is people, whether it is families. I think it's important because lot of interesting things are happening across, and lot of companies really from a size standpoint, a location standpoint, a headcount standpoint. Everybody is going through different kind of experiences right now. So there is no cut paste kind of a application that you do that, okay, this company, we need to just strike jobs. I think I would still expect leadership to really take a very, very informed call whether we really need to cut call. Yes, if you're too small, if you think you can't even survive 1 month, probably like the other co-panelists mentioned, well, if the business goes down, everybody goes down. So if there could be those scenarios, but I think larger companies with deeper pockets should be able to sail through. But yes, the recovery is going to take some time.
Okay.
Tanvi, can I
let
come
me
in here?
put out across a very... Yes, Rituparna, please go ahead.
So I think there are two sides to this. One is a debate around the informal workforce and the formal workforce, and the other is between the permanent employees and the contractual, which means formal contractual employees. So as I'm part of that industry, let me spend a couple of minutes talking about what has happened in that space. I think we have seen employers, our client organizations, showing extreme resilience through March. And we have seen that in spite of the distress, some of the business across industries, whether it's retail, entertainment, media, FMCG companies, I think they have shown resilience and commitment to the contractual staff. However, they were also eyeing the first milestone of 14th of April, which was the initial day when the lockdown was supposed to have been removed. But now that the goalpost has changed,
Yes.
we do see signs of distress. And because I think it's showing up in their own revenue streams, in their cash positions. And like my co-panelists shared, that yes, different organizations have different capacities and appetite to be able to tide through the situation. So yes, while still some time back, people were fence sitting, I think now is the time when we're sensing that some of them would probably take a position. And while that was not the intent, I don't think they're trying to marginalize it, just that it's a productivity question now. A large number of the workforce were outbound workforce. While we have been talking a lot about work from home, a large part of these workforce at the entry level are in outbound roles like sales, customer service, logistics, and they have suddenly been rendered without much work to do. And I think that's a reality that we are confronted going forward.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. That's essentially, you've put it very well, Rituparna. This is essentially what I was also referring to, and we're seeing happen quite a bit. So let me move it to the next aspect I wanted to address. Prabir, many who are sitting at home today, working from home, are living in fear that tomorrow my company will perhaps realize I am not required. Firstly, they may not be able to afford me because things are so bad and times are so tough. Secondly, they may also realize that they don't need me because, well, they've managed to find other ways of functioning in these times. So why do it differently? Now, does there need to be, how do you deal with such a problem? How do you deal with this fear that's going on in the minds of employees?
It's a great question, and it's absolutely happening, and it's very logical to expect people to have these worries. And given whatever the panel has already shared about the crisis that we have, and people of all kinds, whether you're your regular employees or your contracted people, or even worse, a larger HR ecosystem of people who are even in households as help, we have a crisis. So first and foremost, I think, companies need to ensure that the empathy is experienced. The concern is at least manifest. I don't think people are going to be wanting assurances and commitments. Everyone understands that. But during this time when people are working from home, are there enough managers who are connecting with their own teams? Are they allowing for what I call catharsis? Are they allowing the emotional, outburst, getting these questions to the table? Are companies and managers and leaders inviting them to the solutioning? What are the ideas that they have? And I can tell you there are many, many ways in which you can actually think about making sure everyone shares a bit of the problem. But people need to be included. I think Again, it varies from company to company, the brand of the company, the culture. And I think someone mentioned it, and I want to pick that issue up. To me, we are at a very interesting cusp of reinventing, reimagining leadership, and leadership which is fair and prudent, leadership which is empathetic but courageous. And I think it has to be manifest in the way we reach out, connect with our people in this stage, especially when they are not all in one place. And therefore, a lot more things is happening through virtual grapevines and real-time connect, real-time empathy, real-time communication, if not false assurance, is an absolute mandatory requirement for managers and leaders to demonstrate at this point in time.
Okay, let me also ask Rajneesh if he wants to come in on the same aspect that I asked, because honestly, that's the thing that's on top of everybody's mind right now.
Yeah, Tanvi, I would really agree with what Prabir mentioned. In these times, communication is going to play a big role. And along with communication, I would also like to use the word engaging. Again, like Prabir mentioned, every manager needs to be really engaging with his or her team on a very regular basis, purely because everybody literally is on a virtual mode right now. And in a virtual mode, when there is no physical, there is no face-to-face, I think people really look forward to having see their leaders' face even. So if we are doing something like this, maybe once a week even, that there is a group call and everybody is available there and we are doing a team call there. Many companies do it on a daily basis, some of them doing weekly basis. I think some of these little gestures are going to be remembered. And this is where you can really try to really contain the nervousness that is getting built up. Somewhere, a lot of assurances should be given, passed on to people that, guess what, we are all into it, we will sail through. And I think the message has to be very clear that we are going to overcome this. I think that is the, so-called resilient step or mood that we should be having with our people, rather than really set the fear inside the team or really scare everybody or set panic into the team. I think those are things that need to be really stayed away for some more time. I don't think, I hope so, fingers crossed, we don't reach that stage. And, we just are able to manage this whole situation in a much more humane way, smarter way. And, everybody is safe out of this.
Now, I agree with what both of you are saying, and yes, hopefully and ideally that should be the way to go forward. But Rituparna, when you get to the next stage, when you get to the ugly stage of cutting salaries or asking people to work or to to go on leave without pay or simply firing them, then none of this. Then does this communication really help? Then how does the communication change?
Communication always helps. I think that is a given. I think there is no such thing called excess communication in an organization structure. Let's err on the side of excess than otherwise. I think one of the important things is that, yes, I understand that the future is unknowable right now and unmodelable, especially in the short run. But I think organizations should start preparing or making assumptions around worst case scenarios, especially given that a lot of lives are depending on them, a lot of livelihoods are depending on them. And I know it's a wicked problem between, at this point of time, to even say it bothers me. But the reality is that right now the wicked problem is the choice between life and poverty. And I think it would hold us well in a good position if we start thinking about alternatives, because some businesses will take very long time to recover. Like we already know, aviation, hospitality, tourism, in some cases, maybe in some sections of retail, are deeply affected, and we don't know when consumer behavior will change towards these sectors. So I think it's already time for us to actively engage about alternatives. And I think starting those dialogues and conversations from now would actually be extremely useful. If there are resources who are available in retail who are right now unproductive, I think there are other jobs in the essential services which are emerging and where there is an acute shortage of labor on account of various reasons, and migration being one of them, or migrant labor suddenly having gone back home. Some organizations have also started worrying that once the 3rd May lockdown is removed, they do not expect 30% of their normal staff to even get back to work because they are in homes and they don't know whether they're going to come back or not. In these scenarios, it is important for us now to take a collaborative approach towards figuring out how to shuffle people, not within the organization, but outside of the organizations. And I think from our perspective, because we are sensing those distress, we've already started doing that. And I think it's time now to think on those lines. Yes, some of these jobs may not be the ideal jobs, but I might as well have a job than no job. So I think that's my perspective to how organizations, especially those who are distressed, should start preparing. It's not just going to be limited to doing LOPs or furloughs or pay cuts. I think for some organizations, this might go beyond that, and hence let's be prepared.
Tanvi, may I just share one
I have
more
a question for all three of you. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, please.
So, one of the other things that I think will be very prudent for companies to do, see, there will be sectoral shifts. And if you start seeing the interconnectedness of different industries, it's not that there is some industry where, you'll suddenly still need skills and you could have transferability and fungibility of skills. So there is a fundamental problem which cuts across industries. So I don't think we have a simple answer. But the one thing that I would advise, and when I wear my old hat, see, the quality of attrition or exit decisions will be very, very critical here. You see, even earlier when there has been downsizing, one of the pitfalls that one should be very careful about is you don't really just send the minions to be butchered. You really have an opportunity of cleansing the system, looking at the heavy costs, looking at reorganizing your architecture, getting out a lot of the middle management, which may not be adding value, a lot of leadership, which is hanging on just for historical reasons. But to me, the issue is, will we have the courage as corporates to actually do what is fair and right rather than what is just convenient? Because you may throw out 100 people at petty salaries, right? Of course, their jobs may not be as needed today. I understand the structural shift. But at the same time, if you let a few senior people or middle managers, people who actually are non-performers still hanging, I think a lot of the employer brand and a lot of the intent of your selection process would be, suspect. And I think companies have to be very, very fair about doing a very difficult job as they go ahead.
Prabir, you mentioned, how many corporates will manage to actually do it in a conscious way and do it in a fair manner. And that actually ties in with the question that I was going to ask. Many of the corporates now and industries and sectors are asking for relief from the government. They're asking for tax breaks. They're asking for only 50% GST and a series of other measures that have been put forward. Now, as they seek this help from the government, should it come with the condition that you get this provided you don't start firing people? Because what's the point if you start pocketing that money, improving your profits, at the same time still cutting down on your costs and letting go of people? Prabir?
Yeah, so, let me for a moment also wear my old civil service officer hat, right? The government also has a big problem. It has to manage at one level its fiscal realities. At the same time, it has to ensure that industry survives and hopefully recovers. So it's not an easy equation to solve. Now, let me put it in perspective. See, the entire discussion today appears to be centered around people. Now, let's be honest, people costs are not the most significant costs in every company. But my own experience also has been they happen to be among the first port of call for leadership and management when it comes to so-called managing costs. So every support that the government makes helps with possible insolvency getting delayed, helps possibly turn around, helps companies with better working capital. So there is a larger play around this. There might be an incentive which therefore helps us generate new demand. So the interrelatedness and connectedness of the economy is how the government would look at it. The government is not going to give you relief just because people will be safe. So it's finally up to the companies to decide what is your cost breakup, what is the strategic call you will make. Is this really the best bite to be focused on? Is there bigger cost hidden somewhere else, which also helps us manage the people issues in a little more humane way or reduce the impact? So a lot will actually depend on how the companies decide to do, because the challenge is letting go of people is difficult, traumatic, but the easiest thing to do. And in India, where labor laws are not really very supportive of the employee, it's a very, very easy option. It's a very easy bullet to fire. But you should not be looking at solving all your larger business problems only through your people solution. That will not work. So any government fiscal support will almost be an unsaid expectation of allowing companies to rejig their expenses to be fair to employees while making sure that they rebuild their business.
Rajneesh, would you like to weigh in on this?
No, so I very much agree. I think very important. Yes, if the government, and although we are looking at other governments also globally, if you see, we have interesting examples of Canada and in Australia, where we have got to know that the government is actually paying the citizens or paying the employers that you ensure that the wages or the salaries get paid. So that is very much like a dole system that is working there. Out here in our context, I think, yes, if something gets extended to the industry, it should have a condition with it. That goes without saying. And I think people, like Prabir was mentioning, the employer shouldn't take an advantage of that and really, like you correctly mentioned, Tanvi, then start showing their own profits or better their margins and all. It is very, very important that whatever benefits get extended, I think it's important how it is deployed, where is it really applied. I think that becomes very important so that the government also gets a confidence that, yes, whatever we have extended to the industry, to the corporates, it's all being done in the right manner, in a very fair manner. That is where, the whole story about this crisis is not about cutting corners and not about taking some shortcuts and what have you. You have to really think through whatever steps you're taking. And that's why a lot of employers are still there's tons and plenty of homework which is happening, which is what is happening towards the government side also. And there's one step at a time that is happening. So my sense is the government will extend some support, and it's for the corporate to also come forward 2 steps ahead, and both need to really collaborate and handle this whole crisis together.
Rituparna, before I wrap this up, that one last question, and taking off from what Prabir was saying, that in many cases, while people cost may not be one of the larger costs, but that's the first thing that many companies look at when they start, saving and when they start streamlining their operations. How else can we go about it? Because that's what happens. You hire a third-party consultant. They'll come in and do their own research and audit and perhaps suggest a significant cutting of costs on the people front as well. What could be the other possible solutions that managers should be looking at?
Again, I think this whole corona situation have taken all organizations by surprise, and hence I don't think they have a template, a set template that they can follow. But I think the work from home essentially has opened up a lot of avenues for organizations to rethink in terms of how they go about doing their business. So organizations who did not have single resources working from home suddenly have seen how business continuity can be ensured, where 100% of the workforce moves to work from home. And I think that's opened up possibilities beyond just employee costs for organizations. Of course, there are high fixed costs that organizations are grappling on, rentals, on fixed assets, and so on and so forth. But I think most organizations have realized there are possibilities that can emerge where there are ways to conserve cash and money and resources beyond employee costs. And I think that's already playing in a lot of people's mind, and work from home suddenly from becoming HR priority have become a business and a finance priority suddenly, just purely on account of this. And with the availability of internet, I think people are seeing the possibilities that can emerge in the world of work just by, and I don't think organizations were prepared for it or were anticipating it, but it just have happened. So I think that is one element. But I think I think it's important for me to mention that employers are already thinking that that talent is not something which is so easily disposable in India. And I'm talking about the Indian context because employability is a big challenge. So when you have a certain X resources, which you have spent time training, grooming, and given the dearth of skilled, talented resources and how difficult it is to find the right resources, I feel that organizations will think twice before taking a random step or the drastic step of letting go of people. And this, of course, I can't generalize. I know there are organizations who will resort to it. But personally, my own interaction with different people in corporate India have actually brought this aspect up, that this worry up, and hence I feel confident and assured that while it might be a last resort for some organizations, but that may not be the first resort.
Okay, a last resort for some organizations. Hopefully that will be for most of them as they look for other ways of saving the company, saving the business, and tiding through this pandemic and the impact it has even on businesses. And I feel going forward, we should have a lot more of these conversations. Extremely essential that while we put the spotlight on the health aspect, we've also often had debates on how it impacts our mental peace and mental health. We also need to start talking about the kind of impact it's having on businesses and how they need to tackle. So I'm really thankful to all three of you for joining us on this special conversation. The companies, corporates need to also be a little bit more conscious towards their responsibility towards people, especially in times like these where there are already so many other burdens that people may have. Last thing that they need is actually their boss telling them that we are done with you, we don't need you anymore. So let's try and figure out what could be the other ways. Let's try and get consultants and experts like we had on our show to tell companies and tell your businesses and guide your managers into how to save costs in other ways and how to communicate better with your staff that's working from home but working for you and working for a salary that they do need in times like these. We're going to continue having such conversations. If you have specific ideas and questions, do write to us and we will take them up. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. Welcome back. Let's actually get you the latest from Mumbai, where the biggest challenge that the city seems to be staring at right now is the number of growing cases from crowded clusters, including the slum areas. Dharavi saw 26 cases being reported in one single day. There have been 9 deaths and 86 people who've been infected so far. But the challenge is just becoming tougher and tougher. Now, before we get into a conversation about how to deal with the problem of crowded clusters, let's go across to Disha, who's joining me with the latest from Dharavi. Disha, much has been done to try and contain the infection, isolate people, set up clinics and quarantine centers. But at this point of time, the cases are still on the rise.
Well, certainly, Tanvi, and we have to keep this in mind. The reason why we are looking at a lot of cases increasing specifically in Dharavi is because the population there is of 10 lakh, Tanvi, and the BMC has now decided to actually do thermal screening door to door of each and every person living in Dharavi, and that is why we are looking at increase in number of cases in the last 1 week, perhaps on a single day. For instance, in the last 24 hours, we have seen 26 more positive cases coming to light, and specifically from 2 of the worst areas inside Dharavi, the Mukund Nagar as well as the Muslim Nagar. These are the slum areas where most of the cases are coming to light if you talk about the positive cases, and this is because the BMC has started door-to-door thermal screening. So till today, in the last 1 week, then if we talk about 30,000 people out of 10 lakh population have already been screened so far. Out of that, 200 people were found with symptoms. symptoms, for instance, like cough and fever, and their swabs were sent for testing. So because the testing has increased in a highly densely populated area like Dhara, we are looking at a number of cases. Another big problem here, and the biggest challenge for the BMC, is that 80% of the population, they do not have individual toilets inside their homes, Tanvi, and that is why people have to step out. They have to use common public toilets, and this is something which they do not really have an option. So they ensure that they sanitize these public toilets every day to contain the spread of the virus. So this is what is exactly happening on the ground level. There's already a team of 20 to 25 doctors who are actually going door to door and screening people. There are drones being used because Dharavi remains to be one of the hotspots. At least till now, 86 cases have been reported so far, including 9 deaths here we are talking about, and more, the BMC says that more cases of course will come to light because the testing has increased.
Okay, all right, Disha, thanks so much for joining us, and bringing us that very clear update on what's happening in Dharavi. Let's also say good evening to Dr. Lakshman Jasani, a consultant for infectious diseases at Apollo Hospitals, joining us this evening. Dr. Jasani, this is the biggest challenge for many of our cities, the crowded clusters, the Juggi Jopdi, the slum areas. Once the cases reach there, the coronavirus infection reaches there, then how do we deal with it? Because no amount of social distancing is really going to work there.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. In an area of Dharavi with a population of 8 to 10 lakh people, if you have an infection like COVID-19, it can spread very rapidly amongst all the people. And what we need for prevention is the social distancing. But in such a small area with so much densely populated area, how do we manage social distancing? That is a big, big challenge. So I think one of the steps which one has to do is to identify the cases. So I think BMC has done the right step in actively looking for the cases. So going door to door, identify people who are symptomatic, who are having fever, who are having respiratory symptoms, going and finding out those people and getting them tested. That is all very important. So what will happen, at least door to door testing will come to know what is the total burden of cases. And if we know the cases, at least we can try to imply some isolation measures over there, at least give them some education about hand washing, social distancing, and so on and so forth. But I think the most important thing is first to identify the cases, send that tests, enough tests should be sent for it, and then see how it can be challenged. Let us know what is the numerator and the denominator of the people infected upon the total number of population who are at risk.
Okay, but does the strategy need to be about containment and locking them down at that location, or maybe possibly looking at decluttering, removing some people from there to ensure that there is no further spread of infection?
Yeah, so that is why I insisted on we need to do case finding, because we do number of cases, we can isolate those cases compared to the other crowds. Because it is not possible to declutter the people from Dharavi. Where would you place them? So that is not an option. The option is containment, but the option of containment only holds true once you identify the cases. So especially I think they should look into the vulnerable population, like those who are elderly, those who have comorbidities. And if those people are infected, keep them in isolation amongst the rest of the population. I know it is easier said than done, but that is what needs to be done so that the entire area is locked down and cases are separated from the contacts.
Okay. The other thing that our reporter was also mentioning is that how the authorities and the local corporation is going about sanitizing the entire area, spraying chemicals in literally every household. Is that something that can help?
I don't think that will help any further, because see, this disinfection tunnels which are spraying hypochlorite, they are spraying on the body, and we know this is a respiratory viral infection. The virus resides in your respiratory tract. So when you spray this hypochlorite solution on your body or in these areas, it is not going to help further. Yes, you can sanitize, it is good for maintaining the general cleanliness. But if you look into COVID-19 per se, just if you sanitize this area, it is not going to help. The thing which is going to help is mainly social distancing, isolating oneself, doing regular hand wash, wearing mask. These are the strategies which will work in prevention of spread of infection.
But these are not the kind of things that are quite really practical, Dr. Jasani. Unfortunately, in these juggi jopris and slum areas, then shouldn't the authorities look at just moving them at least from that location to some empty buildings and apartments that may be available to ensure that they are able to crack down on this faster?
Yeah, so if we have identified the cases, like you're doing door-to-door mapping, then at least these cases can be transferred to a separate building or separate rooms, which can be kept so that they are kept away from the other general public. See, the young people, if they are exposed to the virus, it's not a worry because they will develop immunity over a period of time. And you know that 80% of the people who have the coronavirus have usually have mild symptoms. What they should target is typically the vulnerable groups. So go to the houses, see who are the vulnerable groups, and either these vulnerable groups are symptomatic, get them tested, and if they are positive, the vulnerable population is positive, you can consider transferring them to an empty building if the PMC has made such provision. But I am sure this is also a very challenging task, shifting the people, the vulnerable population from Dharavi area into the building. That would be a huge challenge as well.
Correct. Apart from the slums, the other big problem that I see is also the shelter homes where homeless are staying and the migrants are staying. There are hundreds of them even on streets right now in different cities as we speak. Does that look like a big challenge for you, at least in the big cities, that could probably elongate this battle against corona for us?
Definitely. I think recently we saw the crowding of the migrant people in Bandra just recently. So the entire concept of social distancing is not being followed. When you have a group of people together with each other, obviously the infection is going to be transmitted. So what is the need of the hour is this migrant population, either they should be given a place to stay with food and water being provided to them, or at least they should be made safe. They can be sent back to their homes. So in that way, the burden of the population, the burden of infection in the population can be decreased. Because if these migrant workers are going to be there, they are going to be staying together. And if infection is there amongst their groups, it's going to spread rampantly. And that will be a huge task to deal with.
So let me ask you this question, and let's go back to the challenge of Dharavi, or even what we are actually seeing in Govandi right now. What would your advice be to the authorities right now, basis what they're already doing? What else should be done for these areas?
Like I told you, the first thing is to do an active case finding. The more number of cases we identify, the better picture we will get about the entire area. Identify where are the cases in Dharavi. Like you can see the Dharavi is split into 5 to 6 small subgroups. And you mentioned that certain areas in Dharavi have a higher cluster of cases. So I think we should identify these clusters, go to those clusters, identify the vulnerable population, test them. If they are positive and if provision can be made, shift them to other locality. If such provision cannot be made, let them isolate them at one place, tell the other people not to get too crowded with them, and maybe use the sanitization measures which we are using. But till we find out these clusters and hotspots within Dharavi, it will be difficult for us to know the greater picture. So I think more active case finding, getting more testing to be done, and after the test, trying to isolate them as far as possible. These should be some of the steps which the BMC should be taking.
All right, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much, Dr. Jasani, for joining us and sharing your views. The fact of the matter being that a lot of this actually depends on case tracing and detecting more and more cases, and only then can we try and move quickly and move ahead of this the infection spread and stop the spread of the infection at that point of time. So yes, the focus needs to be for cities like Delhi and Mumbai and even others where they have lots of crowded clusters and slum areas and juggi jopris, that if the cases have reached there, that it becomes an extremely big challenge, and we need to move very, very quickly. 26 cases, remember we've got from Dharavi just in one day. There are other areas as well in Mumbai that are now looking to move in similar direction and turning up with really high number of cases on a daily basis. So the government and the local authorities need to pay special attention to these hotspots. Now, one of the issues that Dr. Jasani raised was about testing and more testing, and for that you need testing kits. So this is what happened during the government briefing today, along with the health ministry officials, home ministry officials and the ICMR. The ICMR said that India has got finally, yes, 5 lakh rapid testing kits today. But ICMR also clarified that the kits will not be used for diagnosis, but they actually will be used for surveillance. So these will largely be used for hotspots itself. Listen in.
2 किस्म के रैपिड टेस्ट किट्स आज आ चुके हैं। एक लिवजॉन करके कंपनी का है, एक वांटफ्लो करके कंपनी का है। ये जो टेस्ट किट्स हैं, इनकी संख्या लिवजॉन की 2 लाख और वांटफ्लो की 3 लाख है। जब हम रैपिड एंटीबॉडी टेस्ट करेंगे तो ये रैपिड एंटीबॉडी टेस्ट अर्ली डायग्नोसिस के लिए नहीं है। ये लोगों ने समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है। अर्ली डायग्नोसिस को क्यों नहीं है कि हमने 10 दिन होने के बाद में या ऑलमोस्ट 2 हफ्ते होने के बाद में समझो मैंने एंटीबॉडी टेस्ट की तो 80% लोगों में ही सिर्फ वो एंटीबॉडी दिखती है। इसका मतलब मेरा डायग्नोसिस 20% में मैं सिर्फ एंटीबॉडी इस्तेमाल करूं तो 15 दिन होने के बाद में भी मैं बोल नहीं पाऊंगा। इसलिए ये डायग्नोसिस के लिए इस्तेमाल नहीं होती है, ये इस्तेमाल होती है सर्वेलेंस के पर्पस के लिए। सर्वेलेंस यानी क्या? जैसे अग्रवाल साहब बार बार आपको ये बता रहे हैं कि हॉटस्पॉट्स होते हैं। अब ये हॉटस्पॉट पे आपको अगर नज़र रखना है तो यहाँ ये बढ़ते जा रहा है या कम होते जा रहा है ये अगर मुझे देखना है तो मैं ये एंटीबॉडी टेस्ट पीरियोडिकली करके मैं जान सकता हूँ।
Well, moving on, in Madhya Pradesh, the vegetable farmers are bearing the brunt of this lockdown as well. In these testing times, they are being forced to sell their produce at nominal prices. In fact, what they're getting for their vegetables is so low that they're now trying and attempting to travel to other locations in other states in order to get some decent price for these vegetables.
Such multiple complaints are coming that in vegetable markets, the vegetables are being sold on the high prices. Let's check the ground reality that what are the prices is being set out by the farmer who are growing the vegetables. And this is cauliflower. You can clearly see in the picture cauliflower crop is there. And we have one of the farmer who is the owner of this crop. उनसे बात करेंगे। आप ये बताइए, ये जो फसल है अभी आपको लॉकडाउन के टाइम पर कोरोना चल रहा है, क्या आपको पर्याप्त दाम मिल पा रहे हैं?
जी सर, पिछले साल जो फसल इस टाइम पे चालू हुई थी ना, उस समय फसल का भाव 25 से 30 रुपए किलो मिला था अपने लिए। अच्छा। इसमें लागत आती है सर 102 लाख रुपए 1 बीघा में। अच्छा। जो है क्या इल्लियाँ इस टाइम पे अटैक ज़्यादा होता है इल्लियों का, वो दवाइयाँ प्रति पंप मतलब मान के चलो सर 250 रुपये से 300 रुपये पर पंप के हिसाब से डलवाना पड़ती है। 1 बीघा में कम से कम 30 पंप के आसपास दवाई डलती है सर। तो ये 1-2 ट्रॉली के करीब आपकी फसल है, ये कहाँ जाने की तैयारी है और क्या भाव आपको मिल रहा है इसका? सर अपनी सरकार जो मध्य प्रदेश में जो शिवराज सिंह जी की सरकार है ना, इन्होंने सर जगह जगह पर लॉकडाउन लगा दिया। हर जिले में मतलब ऐसा कोई सा जिला नहीं है इसमें जाकर अपन सब्जी बेच सकते हैं सर। तो कहाँ बेच रहे हैं अभी आप? सर अभी उसको बाहर भेजाना पड़ रहा है। जयपुर का परमिट, वो जयपुर के क्या बोलते हैं, 12 के लिए परमिट बनवाया हुआ है इसका। राजस्थान ये मध्य प्रदेश के राधोगढ़ से 12 जाएगा सर। 120 किलोमीटर पड़ता है राधोगढ़ से। आपको क्या भाव मिल रहा है इसका? सर वहाँ पे 10 रुपए किलो या 12 रुपए किलो के आसपास बिक रहा है सर। आपकी लागत क्या होती है किलो के हिसाब से देखी जाए? सर इसमें एक मतलब सर एक एकड़ में अपन जो लगाते हैं ना 5 बीघा में, सर 5 बीघा में लागत कम से कम 3-4 लाख रुपए समथिंग लागत पड़ती है सर घर में। अभी 10 रुपए किलो अगर आपका गोभी बिक रहा है तो आपको कितना पैसा बच रहा है? सर जो बिक जाए वो सर यही बहुत बड़ी समस्या है सर। बेचने के लिए परेशान हो रहे हैं सर। ट्रैक्टरों से तो माल ले जाया जा रहा है सर। रास्ते में जगह जगह पर चेक पोस्ट लगे हुए, चेकिंग करते हैं। इसके बाद माल को मंडियों में ले जाने में तकलीफ हो रही है सर हमारे लिए। चलिए, so this is absolutely, we can understand and realize that this is also one of the side effects of corona. This lockdown is in entire country, and corona has become a big problem. And
completely out of time on this edition of the Urban Debate. Thank you for joining us.